Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our new program, Section 1, hosted by yours truly, Stefan Ramkisoon and Kyle Taklalsing. Just as a brief introduction to the show, the name Section 1 comes from our Republican Constitution, our 1976 Constitution, that says, or that states, that Trinidad and Tobago shall be a sovereign democratic state. This idea has been ongoing for quite some time. Kyle and I had this idea for quite some time.
Yeah, we've been discussing having a program so that we could spread the word of democracy, ensure that people in our society understand the importance of democracy, and sometimes understand that democracy could really be on a knife's edge. It could take very little to tilt a democracy into something even worse, into autocracy, into dictatorship. And while people often think that democracy is only about an election every 5 years, it is much more important. There are much more important aspects and facets to democracy. For instance, a right to free speech. Yeah. For instance, the right to question our leaders. For instance, to ensure transparency and accountability from our government. And we felt, Stefan and I, being lawyers, being in the practice, seeing the different concerns that have come to us, we felt that it was important to have a program like this to engage the citizens, engage the viewers of Jagriti, engage everyone, have a discussion, and let us talk about issues which really affect our democracy.
Yeah, as lawyers, we came together, and clients for quite some time have been coming to us and have been expressing the view that their rights, their constitutional rights, have been slowly eroding over time. I mean, some of our cases, just in particular, that the listeners and viewers of TV Jagriti will know, the sedition case. Where we use Section 1 as part of our case, we wanted to make sure or ensure that we had a program that showed this, that showed the importance of democracy.
There are a lot of issues now, especially in the public domain. So let's look at, for instance, Stefan, the raiding of different media stations, including Jagriti at one point, but it's happened to other media stations now, whereby warrants, police executing warrants on media outlets. Those things have a chilling effect on democracy, on the ability of media journalists to fearlessly and independently discharge their duties and responsibilities. And all those are issues which we feel need to be discussed, need to be ventilated. It may not lead to action, but the point is that if we discuss issues in the public domain, if we allow our callers and we allow you, the viewers, to come out, say what are the concerns as it affects your democratic rights. We feel by having that type of discussion, it will lead to a stronger and more vibrant democracy.
Yeah, it will lead to citizens safeguarding their rights. It will lead to citizens ensuring that their constitutional rights are upheld because they know what their rights are and ways in which they can enforce it. Now, going into this program, Kyle and I, we have made a concerted effort to separate into different segments, and so that we could make it a little bit easier to follow. And I'll briefly go through what those segments are. The first segment is that of the forum.
So the forum will be a segment where essentially we have a topic that is going on, that people are discussing in society. A hot topic that perhaps intersects with democratic rights, or it may intersect with democratic norms and values, and we feel that it needs to be discussed. We want to engage you in that from the specific perspective of Section 1, a sovereign democratic state, and as affecting our democratic rights and values.
Yeah. The second one would be, we call the deposition.
Now, a deposition is known to lawyers, not so much in Trinidad because we don't have so much practice of depositions in Trinidad. We have the witness box. You put a witness in a witness box and you cross-examine and you take him to task, right? You put your case to him in the witness box. We have decided to probably go on a little lighter note, and it doesn't mean that we're going to lighten up our guests.
Definitely
not. We have a guest today which we might have to ask some tough questions.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the deposition is more known to American lawyers, where you elicit evidence and you try to get the story from the witness about certain topics and issues which affect them. And so that's why we decided to call that segment,
the deposition.
The deposition.
And a segment that I think Kyle and I are very, very excited about.
Very proud of it.
We're very proud of it. It's called the soapbox. And first to have a proper discussion on democracy, Kyle, a certain seed, a seed of democracy, a seed of knowledge has to be implanted upon the youth of the nation. They have to understand what democracy is.
Many young people throughout history
Yeah.
have agitated, have raised their voice in opposition to oppressive governments and oppressive regimes. And they have created revolutions the world over.
Yeah.
Student movements and young people having a voice and being passionate about issues have always led to some of the greatest changes in our society,
Correct.
in the history of humankind.
Correct.
And we feel, however little and however small we can do it, we should do that. And so Soapbox is a segment where we want to give some young law student or some young student of democracy, or who's interested in ensuring, preserving and protecting our democracy, a voice to air their concerns or views about issues which affect our democracy, and let's highlight it on the program.
It's an opportunity for students to showcase their abilities, to showcase their critical thinking. And we, as I stated before, we are very proud of that segment. We had a couple videos that came in. We chose one today to showcase.
Yeah.
We will choose today. We are showcasing one by a young lady, but on other programs, if time permits, we will showcase others.
We'll showcase others, and what we'll try to do is to get some topics out there. We're not going to confine you. It's a democratic state after all. You have free speech. Come out, say what you want within the reasons of the law and decency and publishing standards, of course. Air your voice, air your views, send us your videos. We'll review them. We have a good team that will help us go through some of the videos and choose some of the videos that we feel are important and need to be aired in society. So I'm especially excited about that segment.
Yeah. Now, let's move on to the forum, right? The first topic, or the topic in the forum today. Now, Kyle, since the launch, it has to do with the privatization of NP gas stations. Now, since the launch of this program and the launch of our social media Facebook site, a lot of messages and questions have been coming from the public, centered around, not really centered, but a lot of questions focus on this topic.
The privatization.
The privatization.
Yeah, the privatization of gas stations. It's one of the measures which the government is seeking to introduce in the budget. Of course, there are obviously economic arguments for liberalization. There are economic arguments against it. Yeah. We aren't going to get into that so much. I think what our focus should be is whether or not the privatization of these gas stations would lead to some type of monopoly. Yeah. Because that is really the concern. A lot of people have come in.
The concerns are twofold, Kyle. What it is, it's one, the actual privatization of the gas stations. So maybe the procurement of those gas stations. Right. At the end, the procurement of those assets. And two, as you would have stated, the potential emergence of what we call in law a cartel as a monopoly, right? And those are the two issues that we want to discuss today on the forum, in the forum.
Yeah, I think you have it right. It has to do with, firstly, these are national assets. The control of fuel, the price of fuel has always been, historically in Trinidad and Tobago, it has always been a very controversial issue. Yeah. The removal of the subsidy generated a lot of talk, a lot of criticism. Some governments have stayed away from it. Some governments have implemented it. Yeah. And so it's always a hot topic. And so anytime you tackle fuel, gas, there are ripple effects in the economy. Correct. You don't need to be an economist to know
Understood.
that if you raise gas, you're going to affect prices on several commodities in the country. What we are concerned, and what it seems that the new narrative that is prevailing throughout society is, if these gas stations go into the private sector, those, of course, with the big financial resources would seek to buy as many gas stations as possible, create a sort of cartel, create a monopoly on gas stations, and then, unrestrained by the government and unrestrained by political considerations, they could then set prices, of course, with profit being the only determining factor.
Now, getting into, for the general public, when we say cartel, we mean it's a group of companies, essentially, a group of individuals who would have purchased these assets, and they're coming together to not only they could restrict supply, they could increase the supply, but importantly for the consumers out there, to ensure that there is no price fixing. We want to ensure that there is no price fixing.
Well, you see, price fixing, and that's the problem. Price fixing essentially distorts competition.
Correct.
It distorts the marketplace to some extent. But more importantly, apart from the distortion, it deprives the citizen of choice.
Yeah.
It undermines your choice because
It's inimical to free trade.
it's inimical to free trade. So whereas for, let's say, other products, let's say something simple, soft drinks, foods, you could go to the supermarket and choose different things, and you have a free choice
Yeah.
of which brand, who to support,
Yeah.
where you would like to put your money to support a certain brand. However, if it is that you had one company, one cartel, one group of individuals controlling several installations,
Yeah.
fuel installations, your free choice has essentially been eroded, one.
Correct.
But two, you're not subjected to the whims and fancy of those persons owning that gas station,
Yeah.
and the terms and conditions which they impose upon you.
Now, if a cartel is to form, it creates that powerful class of people, right, Kyle? I mean, you would once you create that class of people owning these gas stations, they have that power, a potential power to do this, to price fix.
Well, what it does is it essentially, in my view, it concentrates power in the hands of a few people.
Correct.
And it concentrates power in the hands of a few people who control a very essential commodity. In fact, in some larger countries, the supply of fuel and energy is a national security consideration.
Correct.
America often talks about it being very important to their national security to ensure that they have importations of oil and gas. Well, now they produce shale, but the securing of energy, because a society can't really run without energy.
It affects everything. It affects every form of consumer. Once you're a consumer, you're buying groceries, you're buying anything. Fuel affects those prices. It will affect you in any way. Even if you do not own a motor vehicle, it will affect you when you go to the grocery and you pay something.
And that's why it's important. And I think, I wouldn't say it's important. What I would say is that I think that we have to scrutinize the issue.
Yeah.
It may very well be, and I mean, I'm not an economist, Stefan is not an economist. We can't tell you the minutiae of what are the practical economic considerations as to why you should liberalize the ownership of gas stations.
Yeah.
But what we can tell you is that there is an issue there which affects our democracy in our view. And it's been expressed to us by several people who have asked us to look at this issue. It really wasn't the first choice, but when
really
it came
wasn't.
out, when it came out, we said, but wow, a lot of people are actually concerned about the formation of monopolies and cartels.
A lot of
and they
inbox
want us
messages.
to comment on it. And it's essentially because of what we said. It concentrates power in the hands of a few. It creates something that is called a plutocracy.
Yeah.
A plutocracy is essentially government by the wealthy,
Yeah.
or governed by the wealthy. It creates that because when you have people, a few people controlling gas and fuel, two things. They could set prices of fuel and restrict supply, but they also form a very, very serious
Lobbying group.
and powerful political lobby group. They could influence politicians.
Correct.
They could influence government. They could influence senators, right? And with that, they could wield power in our government and affect other decisions to their benefit.
I think that is why a lot of people have reached out to us. It's the concern that this may happen.
Yeah.
We are going into a situation where we're going to an unknown. NP has been run by the government, by private individuals, but now that it's being fully privatized, people are going into an unknown where they're scared. They're not sure how much you will pay at the pump. And as we say, it affects our democracy to ensure that these things are protected.
Now, I think you wanted to go through. Now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about, obviously, is what can we do?
Yeah.
What can we do to, or what should we be calling for as citizens? Now, obviously, everybody would have their own views. There are some suggestions. Steph and I had a discussion about it. There are some suggestions that we wanted to bring to the attention of the public to feed into the national discourse.
Yeah.
One of the things, of course, is the Fair Trading Act. I think that you had some sections you wanted to go through.
If the guys have it up, we could pull up its section 18 and 20 of the Fair Trading Act. Once it comes up, we'll talk about it. Now, this act essentially gave rise to the Fair Trading Commission. That is fully operational now.
And fully proclaimed.
It's fully proclaimed.
So all of the provisions of law are in law. It's fully proclaimed. I understand that the commission itself, so the commission is created by the act. It's a commission which has investigatory powers to look at monopolies, to look at cartels, and protect the public from the abuse.
Exactly.
From the abuse, because you see, when you have a cartel or a monopoly, then you have a dominant position in the marketplace. And the function of the commission is really to protect the public from abuse
Yeah.
by these monopolies.
Yeah. Guys, you have these sections up on thing? Now, once these sections are up, we will go. But if you go into section 18, once you guys pull it up, it goes into something called, we call horizontal and vertical agreements.
Yeah.
And for the general public, what it says, so section 18 says, it is an offense for groups of 2 or more businesses to enter into or give effect to a horizontal agreement, which, and as Kyle was saying, restricts, distorts, and prevents competition. The fair is in terms of this, in terms of the feud,
So
right?
basically what it says is that there's something called a horizontal agreement. If it is Stefan and I own, if I own 5 gas stations, Stefan owns 5 gas stations, we get together and say, hey, Steph, you fix your price at $100,
And
I'm going to fix my price at $100.
Yeah.
Everybody in the geography of our gas stations has
no
to come
choice.
to us anyway.
They have no choice.
And we fix it. And that's that's an agreement whereby we have contrived to fix a price,
Yeah.
which could be seen as an abuse of our dominant position.
And
in
therefore,
I think this section is up there.
The section is not this one. It's section 18. What and this is where once you have an idea that this is happening, you have an opportunity now to go to the commission. This is section 18.
So section 18 creates an offense for the purposes of 2 or more businesses to enter or give effect to a horizontal agreement which restricts, distorts, and prevents competition.
Yeah.
Right? And that is the section we wanted to bring to the public's attention to sort of get into the public domain and inform some of our discussions.
And importantly, we'll get to B. Well, B has the object and effect of monopolizing the market in Trinidad and Tobago. More importantly, fixes prices of commodities and services unreasonably high. And that is where I think a lot of the public who have reached out to us, Kyle, that is where their concern lies. Their concern is that they have a vehicle.
You come back to us.
They have a vehicle, and they don't know how they're going to pay for the gas. They don't know how they're going to drop their kids to school or go to the grocery, and that is the problem that they have. But this section clearly, it unambiguously states that, look, this is an offense to have this horizontal agreement between us.
Well, yes, and they would have to look into it. But again, everything depends on how it's done. We're not here to say that this is what is going to happen.
No,
We're not here to say that this is the intention of the legislators. Certainly not. We can't say that. What we want to highlight in terms of democracy, democratic norms, the guardrails of democracy, if it will, is that people must be able to enjoy, or people must be able to choose the commodities and choose where to obtain those commodities and do so in a marketplace that is free and fair. And
Correct.
I think that is the purpose of anti-monopoly legislation like the Fair Trading Act. And it's also an important role of the Fair Trading Commission. Now, the Fair Trading Commission, and we're not going to go through all of the provisions of the Act. It's online, everybody could read it if they want. But the main thrust of the Act, again, is to prevent the building up of these types of monopolies in our society, the building up of these types of cartels or anti-competitive agreements in our society. The Commission is given very wide powers to investigate, or parts of the Commission are given very wide powers to investigate and to look at these agreements and determine whether or not they in fact contravene these laws and whether or not an abusive position in the marketplace exists. Now that is not to say, and we have to make this very clear, Stefan, because we don't want to people leave here with the impression that this is what is happening.
No.
Or that every monopoly is bad. For instance, Stefan, you could come up with some product. And you alone have that product in the market. Innovation, that's it. And you alone will be selling that in the market and you fix your price.
Correct.
That isn't necessarily bad.
No.
It means you may have a dominant position in the marketplace. You may be able to fix prices. You may be able to set the terms and conditions of sale. You may be able to determine who sells your product.
Correct.
And all of that sometimes is important for marketing, and the marketing specialist would tell you that. What is important, however, is that nobody or anybody who has a dominant position in the marketplace does not abuse their power.
That's the point.
And for something like fuel, which everybody
it's an
uses,
essential commodity.
It's an essential commodity.
And that is where we want to ensure. Look, as Kyle said, we're not assuming that certain things are going to happen.
No.
What we want to ensure is that the public understands the provisions in place to protect you as the consumer. The government has it was proclaimed early in 2020, I believe.
It was proclaimed early in 2020, and it's a section of law. And I think one of the things we have to call upon, I think, if this issue didn't come up, I don't think that most people actually knew that there was a Fair Trading Commission.
Correct.
Or that we had these types of laws, because
Yeah.
a lot of the questions we received from people, what could be done to prevent this? Could we file any public law, constitutional action, those kind of things? And, the point is that we have protection of the law in Trinidad and Tobago.
Exactly.
And we have a law that seeks to regulate this. You can't challenge every law under the sun. You can't challenge everything. It's not for lawyers to run to court every time a law displeases
Correct.
people. What you really want to look at is the effect of that law and whether or not it's discriminatory. On its face, as is, the pure liberalization of gas station doesn't necessarily affect or intersect your constitutional rights or give you a cause of action to go to court.
Yeah.
Especially where you have legislation
To protect.
to protect.
And I mean, anyone who goes to America, any part of America, you will notice on every street corner,
Yeah.
there is 2 or 3 gas stations at different prices.
Yeah.
And the price of the gasoline there would be dependent upon the price of oil.
So what you're saying actually is that it may actually be a benefit.
Benefit, yeah.
Because if gas stations, if I have a gas station, Stefan is a few streets down and he has a gas station, we may want to compete with each other.
Exactly.
And have the prices as low as possible.
So that we can get the sales.
And also ensure that our service in the gas stations
Is much better.
Because now we're in a competitive market. It
Exactly.
isn't as though NP and NP. Now it will be Stefan versus Kyle, owners of gas stations. I'm not giving you a gas station, by the way, Stefan, right?
Yeah.
It could be that, and that we ensure that our service is up to mark, our customer service is up to mark.
It is akin to the telephone networks back in the day.
Yeah.
When
Where
we
you only had
when we
TSTT.
only had TSCT,
Yeah,
and then Digicel came on board,
Yeah.
and the services provided was a lot more. It could be stand to be corrected, but the prices were reduced
Yeah, well,
because
several
of the
people might
competition.
want to correct you, but
Well,
but at the end of the day, I think that the competition in the telecommunication market and the media market and several other markets
it has worked for the
lead to
consumers.
benefits. But and it's always a very fine debate in economics.
Yeah.
How much do you regulate?
Correct.
And it could be, and one of the things that I would like to suggest is that the government set up some type of oversight body. So you have something called the RIC for
Yeah.
TNTech and WASA, Regulated Industries Commission. That is a commission that is set up to look at the provision of services such as water, such as electricity,
Yeah.
and ensure that the services are up to standard, and to look at the prices and that sort of thing and make recommendations.
Yeah.
It's either A, the government tries to bring the provision of fuel, which I think is just as important as water and electricity and other essentials,
Yeah.
into the RIC,
Into the
or
RIC.
the government could set up some other type of regulatory body to keep an eye on these gas stations, these private gas stations. While they're private, while it's their private commercial business, you have to provide some kind of oversight.
Yeah.
It's not everybody that could run to court and file an action because they got bad service from a gas station.
Correct.
But what you want to do is provide a means, and this is where democracy comes in, access to justice, access to law, access to remedies. You want people to be able to have an avenue where they can legitimately air their grievances on any type of service and have some sort of redress.
Yeah, no, ideally, leading from that, what could lead to confidence in the public could be, respectfully, in my humble opinion, the proclamation of the Procurement Act.
The Procurement Act,
Because
that's another important one.
I think it's an important part because there must be some level of transparency for the sales of these assets and to show, look, what is the tendering procedure? Who bought these
And that's an important point. You see,
Yeah.
one of the things in society, and a lot of intellectuals have spoken about it, in society, for an economy to run properly and for a society to have a sense of satisfaction, you must have equity in a society. And
Correct.
equity does not only mean things are necessarily even and equal across the board. That isn't what equity only means. Equity also means that there must be a sense of fairness. And I think a lot of people in society feel deprived of the opportunity to own a gas station, because several people may have savings funds, they may be having other businesses,
Yeah.
and they would like the opportunity to own these gas stations. But you know what the talk is? The talk is, nah, that the government reserved that
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah.
Them supporters, or the big boys in society are going to get it. And what you have, therefore, is an undermining of a sense of fairness and equity in society,
Correct.
which leads people to be discontent,
Yeah.
which leads people to have other forms of repressed anger and discontent, and throw shackles into your constitution, that into your economy, that you may not necessarily have wanted.
Once the government has that level of transparency, it would lend to the confidence that the public has with them.
Yes, I think
And
so.
and the main thing is have that level of confidence with their stakeholders. The main stakeholder being your citizens.
The citizens, the
and
people.
and that is where we have to ensure that it happens. I mean, that is my respectful view. That if it is that the Procurement Act is proclaimed,
I agree with you. Well, parts of the Procurement Act have been proclaimed.
Yeah, correct.
The Procurement Act, from memory, is designed to regulate and to ensure fairness, both in the acquisition
And the disposal
of assets.
of assets.
And certainly these gas stations falling under a state company would or could be construed as assets, and therefore the
disposal of those assets.
and the enactment of the full proclamation of the Procurement Act and the operationalization of the Procurement Act would ensure that people have a fair shot,
Correct.
a fair chance of either A, owning this gas station, or B, the public will be protected, the public's purse will be protected. Another suggestion that I've heard in relation to this, and I think it's a good suggestion, is that the terms and conditions of sale, the
That is
sale
important.
contract of these gas stations are such, and they're designed in such a way that you have certain conditions. For instance, when you own a private business, a private company, a private grocery, a private parlor, whatever it is, you're entitled to sell to who you want.
Yeah,
you could
correct.
very well put someone else out of the of your business and say, I'm not selling to you. What happens in times of a fuel shortage? Let's say there's a fuel shortage in the country and you have very limited gas, very limited fuel. These cartels or monopolies, if they form and if they exist, could very well sit back and say, well, I'm going to support business A and B, or class A and B, and I'm not going to support class C and D.
Correct.
And what you have now is a dispensation of power or determination of whose business succeeds and whose fails by private individuals who control one of the major assets in the country.
One of the major
In
commodities.
the country.
And that is the problem.
That is a very serious concern.
Yeah.
Another thing that has to be done, and I think this is more political consideration, is that the government needs to ensure on its own that the distribution is equity. I think the Honorable Minister of Finance did say that it would be sold to licensed owners
Yes,
first. And I think that's a good step.
That's fair. That's fair. You
enough,
have your
yeah.
license and you're being offered it first. And I think
You're
that's
running
fair.
it, you know how to run it.
You will get first shot at it.
And you get first shot at
And
it.
that is fair in the circumstances.
Yeah.
But Kyle, we have been talking now for about half an hour.
We've been
Let's-
talking for time is flying.
Yeah.
But maybe we should just recap on it. Our forum discussion today, I think we see as a very important topic.
Yeah.
The liberalization or the sale of these fuel stations, these gas stations to the private sector.
Yeah.
We think that it impacts and affects our democracy, because now you have private individuals controlling very important state assets and resources, and a very important resource.
Yeah.
It could lead to the formation of a very powerful group of people, a very powerful lobby that could wield power for ends that are not desirable.
Yep. And
We want
importantly,
to remind the people that we
that
have
we have the Fair Trading Act and the commission that is set up to protect you, the consumers, to ensure that these things don't happen, ensure that these cartels and these monopolies don't exist.
you have provisions which prevent the creation of dominant and abusive positions in the marketplace. You also have the proclamation of the Procurement Act that we want government to fully implement.
Yep.
And we also want some type of equitable distribution in it. I think that's our position on the show.
That is.
To assist, but keep the issue alive. People, we have just put this out because we want to start a conversation.
Correct.
And we want you to look at this conversation, not only in terms of the cost of gas and the cost of fuel and how that impacts the economy, but people should also be acutely aware of how something like this could affect your democratic rights, your position in democracy,
Correct.
and governance overall.
Yeah. So Kyle, let's take a quick break and we will come back with our